Hi, everybody. It is so exciting to see all of you tonight in the virtual universe. I'm Marci Hamilton. I am the CEO and founder of Child USA. And this is our first installment in a series of films that are really for the purpose of discussion and thinking about the work that Child USA does on ending child abuse and neglect. And tonight we are so excited to have this really first-rate film about Sarah Klein and Liz Goldman's remarkable friendship and how it developed. And so let me just say welcome. I hope that you all enjoy this. If you have any questions at all, you can throw them into the chat. If you have questions for the panelists for after we view Silent No More, throw them into the chat and we will make sure that your voices are heard. I'd like to thank our panelists. We'll hear from them after the showing, but we've got Sarah Klein here and Liz Goldman, of course, Dr. Liz Goldman, and we've also got Adam Berger. We are hoping, we're really hoping that we'll have Armin Katayan, but he got his second COVID shot today. So we're hoping for him feeling better. So let me just tell you that this is one of a series of events on April 8th today, which is in fact the World Day for Child Sexual Abuse Prevention. And after this, there will be an event that RAIN is supporting for celebration of survivors at 9 p.m. So it's a day-long event, and the Keep Kids Safe Coalition is part of it, and we're one of the founding members of Keep Kids Safe. Now, let's see. We have a really neat feature tonight, and that is that CAPS, which is the University of Pennsylvania's Counseling and Psychological Services, has agreed to provide a therapist who will be here. It's Dr. McCorsky, providing a confidential support space if you need it as you watch. The link will be in the chat box, and feel free to take advantage of that. If for any reason, as you are listening to the presentation or the panel, please take advantage of that if you'd like to. We are going to begin the film screening, but before we do that, I want to give a big shout out to our community ambassadors. This is the first event our community ambassadors have essentially hosted, and they are the reason that we have such a large audience. And if you're interested in being a community ambassador, I'll talk to you about that after the show. But also, I just want to say thank you to every one of them. And we will be giving them specific recognition right after we show the film. So everybody get comfortable, and we'll see you in about 40 minutes. I hope you enjoy it.
Only now are we coming to grips with the epidemic of sexual abuse in sports that for decades stole the childhoods of countless young athletes. No case epitomized that abuse more than the USA gymnastics scandal, in which more than 250 girls and young women were sexually assaulted by trainer Larry Nassar. But this is a story unlike any you've heard before, of two women living parallel lives.
He was a great guy.
Almost like a father figure.
Survivors of serial sexual abuse. One at the hands of Nassar, the other a teacher and coach.
He would hold me and touch me and push me up against him.
Your athletic trainer's penetrating you with his fingers and it hurt.
Confused, conflicted.
I hated the way his eyes would look at me.
It's insane. It's insane.
I loved Mr. Mack.
I feel like at least some part of Larry loved me too.
Years later, fate intervened and their lives intersected. One, the patient, the other, her therapist.
I was still suffering.
Sarah herself didn't realize that she had been sexually abused.
Then everything changed.
I felt that I have to do something.
She's been my lifesaver.
Silent, no more. Sarah Klein grew up in the small town of Okemos, Michigan, Spartan country.
We were taught the fight song in elementary school. We were taught to wear green and white on Fridays before a big game. Everything in our town revolved around Michigan State University.
By the age of 8, she was competing in gymnastics, practicing 4 days a week, 4.5 hours a day. Her trainer was Larry Nassar. Yes, the same Dr. Larry Nassar at the center of the USA gymnastics sex abuse scandal.
Okay, what's happening there is
The most sweeping and disturbing in the history of sport.
I don't know what originally attracted Larry to gymnastics. I don't know if he saw an opportunity to be the good cop there. If he did, he found the right place to set up shop. All we ever heard from our coaches were how bad we were, how worthless we were. They hurt us so bad psychologically, and then he would be there to build us back up.
As the treatments change, what changes? And how old are you when they change?
They changed pretty fast. No red flags went off because he explained medically exactly what he was doing. And at 8 years old, you don't know about sex or your body or really boundaries even.
you know, bip, 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 bop, 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 boo, boo, boo. So a little bippity boppity boo there.
Your athletic trainer's, penetrating you with his fingers and it hurt, but you didn't, in an 8-year-old mind, distinguish between the two.
It was just part of the treatment.
Yep. It was like, second nature. He was a very benign, non-threatening, loving person, almost like a father figure. The thought that he was harming us, my brain didn't compute.
But he's not wearing any gloves or anything. His hands are inside you, pretty much everywhere he wants to go. And you're thinking,
this is what you do for a broken tailbone. This is what you do for a terrible lower back pain. This is what you do to fix a hip.
and he's walking you right through it. So it's not like you feel like you're being molested.
At all.
You feel like you're being healed.
Yes.
Because he's being very kind and very specific about
very specific and very believable.
And now when I say those words to you and repeat them back to you, knowing what you know now, you think what?
It's insane. It's insane. I'm a mother, of a daughter. It's insane what he was doing, and it's insane how well he did it.
And that it was allowed to happen?
Yep.
Third place from Great Lakes, Sarah Klein.
At 16, an injury to her wrist and arm ended Klein's promising gymnastics career, but not her reliance on Larry Nassar.
I also had a fractured vertebrae, just immense pain in my back. I felt lucky, like I didn't have to make an appointment. I just got to go to Michigan State Sports Medicine and go to lunch with the doctor, who at this point was starting to go to the Olympics.
He's a god at that point.
Yes, and it felt so good to get to see him when I came home from college, and the fact that he still wanted to treat me, even though I was no longer a gymnast, I thought it was awesome.
At 25, Klein's family moved away from Okemos, finally ending 17 years of treatments by Nassar. At the time, Klein wasn't able to process what was happening to her mind and body. You said you didn't come out of the house for
Like 7 years.
7 years?
Yeah. My 20s were a struggle. Into my 30s, I was depressed. I was having medical problems. I was just suffering. And I kept trying to get help, but I didn't know what I needed help for.
And you're suffering from, as you discover, autoimmune diseases, and you make a further discovery that it's connected to the treatments.
My fertility almost being completely compromised because of the sexual trauma that I've experienced. I mean, that's the ultimate blow. That's what broke my heart. 2 major pelvic reconstructive surgeries, losing 90% of my ovaries, having to do IVF over and over and over, and getting terrible results just trying to become a mother. When I finally sought out the best endometriosis surgeon in the country, he did my surgeries and he said, that was one of the worst cases I've ever seen in my career. And he said to me, have you ever been sexually abused?
He did.
And I said, no.
When did you come to the realization that this so-called treatments were actually serial sexual abuse?
Rachel Denhollander, 2016, Indy Star comes out. I didn't even read the article. I just saw the headline and was like, oh my God, oh my God. I knew immediately it was true.
In September 2016, former gymnast Rachel Denhollander became the first person to publicly accuse Nassar of sexual abuse, opening a dam of similar charges and a flood of emotions for Klein, along with one shocking realization.
You feel stupid. It's like, are you kidding me? How did I not get that?
And then it dawns on you, you're just not one of the victims. You are very well the first victim. And are you feeling guilty?
Just shock initially. The guilt set in, especially at sentencing, just feeling like none of this would be happening if I would have just told somebody.
In January 2018, Nassar was sentenced to 40 to 175 years in prison after being found guilty of sexually molesting more than 250 girls and young women over 3 decades. In this Lansing, Michigan courtroom, some 100 survivors gave one powerful impact statement after another.
Victims were silenced, intimidated, repeatedly told it was medical treatment, and even forced to go back for continued sexual assault.
One of the most powerful came from Sarah Klein, who asked that only her voice be recorded as she stood a few feet away from the man she hated and in many ways still loves.
Who was that first girl? Am I her? Do you even remember? Do you even remember what we will never forget? I laid alone, naked, in your apartment in 1992, me, 12 years old, you, 28 years old, while you massaged my tiny body, touching my clitoris and penetrating my formerly unpenetrated self.
It was a big moment, you know, it was empowering, terrifying, and also very sad. I mean, this is somebody I deeply, deeply loved and still feel love for. He's frail, he's tiny, he looks terrified, he's wearing handcuffs. You know, that was hard.
I can hear people listening to you, Sarah, saying, what in the world does she mean by that? Larry Nassar serially sexually abused her for years, and she says she loves him.
That's the whole grooming. You can love somebody and they can harm you at the same time. It doesn't mean that there was no love there. I feel like at least some part of Larry loved me too.
You did not want cameras on during your statement.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it wasn't between anybody else except for he and I at that point.
In that split second, when you made the choice to put that finger inside of our little tiny bodies for the first time, not for medical treatment, but for your own pleasure, you changed the entire course of our lives.
He was my rock in this very tumultuous, crazy crazy world of gymnastics. And he was my person that understood the world, even more so than our parents, because he was in the gym.
Protected you from the world?
Protected me, took care of me. He was my guy, and somebody I thought I would know for the rest of my life.
Next year, I will be 40 years old. And you're spending the rest of your life in prison.
Much of Nassar's 3 decades of sexual abuse occurred while he was a trainer and physician for USA Gymnastics and Michigan State University. In a settlement agreement, the school agreed to pay survivors $500 million, but Klein and others charged Nassar's crimes did not occur in a vacuum.
Somebody doesn't get away with penetrating little children for 30+ years without other adults looking the other way and covering up. They place their reputations and their positions and their titles first. There was a right way to handle this and a wrong way to handle this, and both institutions chose the wrong way and then chose that again and then chose that again and chose that again.
Liz Goldman is a psychiatrist who practices outside Philadelphia. She listens to other people's secrets. This story is about her own. It begins in the affluent suburb of Lower Merion, a place where Goldman grew up. For decades, Lower Merion prided itself on not just some of the best public schools in the country, but the safest.
I loved being with my friends, riding my bike. It was kind of a carefree time. We did whatever we wanted.
In the summer of 1984, as a 7th grader at Bala Cynwyd Middle School, Goldman received some welcome news. Her homeroom and history teacher would be Bill McKendry.
He was many people's favorite teacher. He had a lot of energy, and I was drawn to that energy.
And he had a nickname, right?
Mr. Mac. We all called him Mr. Mac. And he paid a lot of attention to me, and he asked me a lot about my life. He told me about his life, and I felt honored and special.
Even more honored when Goldman tried out for the school's field hockey team, and Mr. Mack took special notice.
Took off my shoes, my socks, and he tended to my blisters, put Band-Aids on them, put my socks back on, my shoes back on, and it just seemed like a nice, almost like a parental thing to do.
Mr. Mack was also the school's wrestling coach. Every year, he handpicked 2 girls to be his team managers. As she entered 8th grade, one of those girls was 13-year-old Liz Goldman. Bill McKendry was 40 years old. Did you ever just say, why am I the special one?
Well, he would tell me that he'd never met anybody like me, that he loved me more than he loved his wife, he couldn't live without me.
He would say that to you?
Oh, yeah. He had this 5-year plan for us to get married and spend our lives together.
Did you feel at that time that I can't live without him?
I did feel that way, actually.
Day by day, McKendry was closing in on one very confused young girl on the edge of adolescence. A word of warning, what you're about to hear is both graphic and disturbing.
During the wrestling season, it was easy access. I was with him every day. The wrestling equipment room was up a set of stairs, so he would send me to go get something, and then he started to follow me up there. This is stuff I really hate to talk about. He would come in after me, and I was comfortable and uncomfortable, and he was a big guy. He'd pin me up against the wall there, and he would kiss me and hold me and touch me and, just feel all around. And that played out many times in that wrestling equipment room.
And you're thinking at that point, what?
Well, there was this movie called Clash of the Titans, and there was this character, Medusa. If you looked at Medusa, you would turn to stone. And so Mr. Mack had this way of looking at me in the friendship, Mr. Mack, that was very loving and tender, and I loved that about him, and I wanted that. But when he started to kiss me and touch me, I actually pretended he was Medusa. So in his eyes, because I hated the way his eyes would look at me, it was this wanton, desperate, almost angry. I was a little afraid of him. And I just kept thinking, I'm Stone. I am Stone. I don't have to feel this.
And he's driving you home from from practice.
So after the car was terrible. He would drive my closest friend at that time, Julie, who was the other wrestling manager. He would drive her home, and then 5 minutes from her house was this parking lot where he would park his car, and he would sit and he would put me on his lap, and I was pressed up close against him, and he would feel me, he would put his hands between my legs, he would kiss me, he would hug me. He kept telling me he wanted to kiss every square inch of my body.
And there has to be a moment in your mind almost every single day where you're thinking, I'm gonna end up in this parking lot.
Oh yeah, every day I was in that parking lot for months. He gave me gold heart earrings, gold heart ring. He gave me a stuffed animal. He wanted me to pretend that that stuffed animal was him. His mother had dementia and was ill. And he showed me her engagement ring in the back of that car and said, this is for us, we're going to get married.
And it didn't stop there.
He came to my house and he wanted to see my bedroom. He loved seeing my bedroom. He gave me Shalimar. He thought that Shalimar was the sexiest smell around. He said he loved everything about my body and he wanted to know everything about my body. And he would never hurt me when he fully got to know my body. And he wanted to rub me up against his body very tightly in his car.
And you're talking on the phone too.
He would call me all the time.
On one hand, there are these moments where you're really frightened. And on the other hand, there are these moments when you're completely in love.
Completely in love. He starts to write me more love letters and love letters and love letters.
All leading up to what Goldman says was Mr. Mac's endgame, President's Day weekend, 1986. Your parents are gone that weekend, and he wants to take you to a hotel.
Right. And in the parking lot, I mean, his hands were all over me. He was spraying Shalimar on me. I was spending the weekend at my friend Julie's house. So he took me to her house, and he kept calling me at her house. I have notes, a little script of what I said to him on the phone, just of being overwhelmed and saying this is, really not right. It was a little sign of strength that I look back on positively that I put somehow into words then.
If you had gone to that hotel room with Mr. McKendry just turning 14 years old, what do you think would have happened?
I think we probably would have had sex.
It was then that Goldman finally said something to her mother.
What I was hearing was a child who was overwhelmed and said, I can't do this anymore. He's sending me too many things and too many notes and too many love letters.
Debbie Goldman is Liz's mother. She and her husband Henry marched down to the middle school. They met with McKendry, an administrator, and a guidance counselor.
What she said basically was, this is a bad thing. It's a shame that it happened, but he's a new father. We've never had a complaint about him before. So let's give him a second chance. We'll deal with it. We'll get him into therapy.
Cover it up.
Cover it up, silence everything about it. When we went to see the perpetrator, he apologized profusely. I'll never do it again. It was just a wrong thing.
Then I was brought into the guidance counselor. She simply said to me, you stay on the 8th grade floor. He'll stay on the 7th grade floor. Stay away from him, and then you don't have to see him.
How stupid was I? How we couldn't have protected her more is my pain forever.
That's a hard thing for a parent to deal with.
Oh, yeah.
I hate to use the word guilt, but...
Oh, I have it, and it's never going to go away. This is my daughter. How could I have let her walk in a hallway where he might have been? It's my shame. It's my shame.
For the remainder of 8th grade and middle school, Goldman said she had no contact with McKendry. While the school hoped their problem had disappeared, for Goldman, more than a decade of confusion was ahead of her.
It went from being this massive part of my life to nothing. And that was devastating for me. Even though it was terrifying, I was willing to pay the price of having sexual contact with him to get what he was giving me.
In ninth grade health class, Goldman wrote a paper revealing her sexual experience with a teacher and coach, a cry for help that went unanswered. The next year, she finally confronted McKendry, who she says played the sympathy card, crying and telling Goldman he loved her and how he'd considered suicide. She then met with a middle school assistant principal. His response, she told us, sometimes these things happen. It's best to move on. It wasn't until 1999, 13 years later, after Goldman graduated from the University of Pennsylvania and was in medical school studying to become a psychiatrist, that she returned to Lower Merion School District, still searching for answers. She met with William Kearns, then the director of personnel for Lower Merion, with McKendry's love letters in her hand.
He was hostile, he was negative. He said to me, what are you doing here? And why now?
Why now?
Why now? Mr. Kearns, he said to me, why are you showing us these letters? I saved these letters because they were really special to me, not realizing they were evidence.
They're completely incriminating.
Completely incriminating. They said, no one's ever complained about this before. How come you didn't tell us all about this in 1986? They couldn't get me out the door fast enough.
6 more years went by. Goldman married and gave birth to a son. It proved a turning point.
And I just realized that my duty as a parent is to protect my child. And I'm thinking, Mr. Mack is still at the school.
Goldman returned to the Lower Merion School District offices, this time with husband Brad Lieberman to face 2 administrators.
If we had walked in that meeting and the school had said, this is horrible what happened to you, and we are now going to do everything we can do to help you and to make it right, I don't think they would have heard from her again. And in the middle of the meeting, I realized that was not where they were going to go at all. And I said, you're just playing a game. And that agitated them, and
it escalated.
There.
It was unpleasant.
And the end result is?
They send me a letter basically saying, we looked into this, we've investigated it, we hold our teachers to high standards, this matter is closed.
But that doesn't end it for you.
I was pissed. So I wrote a letter stating that I thought it was my civic duty to inform the head of the Home and School Association, superintendent, the Pennsylvania State Education Association, and then the head of HR called and said that Mr. McKendry is no longer there.
He had resigned?
He had resigned.
And he had been there 36 years.
36 years. 19 years after which he and I had our relationship, which I should call sexual abuse, and I sometimes still call it a relationship.
The Lower Merion School District declined an interview request made by The Athletic, as did William Kearns. Bill McKendry did not reply to our requests for comment. In an email to The Athletic, the district claimed it conducted its own investigations into Dr. Goldman's claims based on the information made available in 1986, 1999, and 2005. In 1999, it claimed it consulted with the local district attorney. In the ensuing years, they wrote, the district has updated its policies and methods for investigating situations where improprieties may have occurred. According to his wife, former school administrator Kearns lives in a long-term care community. In an email she wrote, my husband has read your letter. He has no recollection of persons or events mentioned and is unable to respond to allegations that occurred over 20 years ago. The Athletic does not know of any other allegations of abuse by McKendry, and to our knowledge, he's never been convicted of a crime. In this Philadelphia Magazine story in which Goldman spoke publicly for the first time, McKendry described their relationship as inappropriate but consensual. He acknowledged sending her the letters, but claimed, I never sexually assaulted anyone. I was going through some tough times, but I know that I did nothing wrong in terms of sexually. That's what I remember. I was drinking a lot. There were a lot of times that I considered doing away with myself. Do you still think of Mr. Mack? Does he inhabit a place in your head and your heart every day?
He does. I wish I could say no, but he absolutely does.
Sarah Klein was an 8-year-old gymnast. Liz Goldman was a 13-year-old manager of her school's wrestling team when both were abused by sexual predators. For decades, they stayed silent, unaware of the physical and psychological damage they endured. Now, their paths were about to cross. In November 2015, Klein was suffering, adjusting to life as a new mother, in the throes of an autoimmune disease, still searching for meaning in her life.
I was lost in terms of who I was or what I wanted. It was the greatest event of my lifetime to have that baby that I wanted so bad. I still had that sense that something is wrong and I just don't know what.
Looking for answers, she called more than a dozen different psychiatrists and couldn't get an appointment. Out of the blue, she called Dr. Liz Goldman, now with her own thriving practice. For reasons Goldman still can't explain, she found an opening for Klein. It was the start of nearly 2 years of therapy.
Really helped me adjust to my role as a new mom and really started to put my life in perspective, and her opinions mattered a lot to me.
But you held back your darkest secret. You did not talk about the abuse from Larry Nassar. Why?
It didn't feel significant enough to bring up, and I still hadn't put together that was abuse even at that point.
Any hint at all that she was suffering from the same kind of darkness that you had been through?
Absolutely not. Sarah herself, just like I had felt and experienced, didn't realize that she had been sexually abused.
In September 2017, Klein suddenly stopped coming for therapy. She disappeared for 7 months, a time the Nassar scandal and Me Too movement had broken wide open. Klein slowly coming to grips with 17 years of abuse and the reality she was one of Nassar's first known victims.
It was almost a gift to find this out because it made so much sense of how I had been suffering and couldn't figure out what it was. And my body had been attacking itself, and I had sleeping problems my whole life and anxiety, and something was always off and I could never put my finger on it. But my heart's broken. I'm devastated. I don't know what to do with all of this now.
I've had to realize I was abused for many years of my life.
What she did was join a sisterhood of other survivors. In court, Klein not only confronted her abuser, but also the guilt that had she spoken up, more than 250 other girls and young women may have been spared Nassar's unspeakable crimes.
Had I not been sucked into your pretend care and pretend love, had I not trusted you, had I actually understood that having my vagina and anus penetrated by a grown man that I loved and trusted when I was 12, 13, 14, and beyond was not okay, then I could have spared every girl who came after me.
3 months after her court appearance and 7 months since her last therapy session, a different Sarah Klein walked into Dr. Goldman's office.
And I'm sitting there thinking, wait a second, what? You're a Larry Nassar survivor? You had this experience? And it just flooded me in regard to initially her, like, wait, this can make sense.
The way she understood the complexity of my relationship with Larry and how she understood that I could love him, and she didn't say to me, you know, what do you mean? Are you crazy? She helped me understand that you could love somebody and they can be evil at the same time.
She's throwing you a lifeline.
Yeah, because it's just one big pile of emotion and shit that you then have to sort out if you're going to really move forward with your life and begin the healing process.
I felt envy that she could say to Larry's face all of these things. People were listening in a court of law, and the consensus in the nation was, this is disgusting, this is horrible, there's outrage. How could this doctor, how could this monster do this to these girls? And how could MSU have done what they did? How could USA Gymnastics do what they did? And it really helped me understand Sarah better and also understand with incontrovertible clarity that the Lower Merion School District harbored a criminal. They institutionally were corrupt, and that I wasn't crazy in thinking that what happened to me was not good.
An epiphany.
It really was.
And you make a decision.
Yes.
That decision to open up to Klein about her own sexual abuse did not come without considerable thought or risk to Goldman.
It's a tough challenge as a psychiatrist. I'm trained, appropriately so, do not talk about yourself. But it just was an opportunity to help Sarah realize, I actually get what you're talking about, because she felt foolish. You know, I knew that he did this to me, but I didn't see it as sexual abuse. How come for all these years, how come I didn't say anything about it? And I understood that. And Sarah loved Larry Nassar. I loved Mr. Mack. I got that.
Mr. Mack, Bill McHenry, the teacher and coach Goldman alleges abused her when she was 13 and 14 years old. In an act of therapy and compassion, Dr. Goldman decided to cross the line between patient and therapist and share her own secret.
I said, Sarah, I have to tell you this because I think this could be useful information for you to have so that you can understand yourself and feel understandable in a way that is vitally important to our work together.
I'm thinking by some divine intervention, am with the exact right person at the exact right time in the exact right place. Knowing that she went through something similar gave so much more weight to her ability to help me navigate. You know, she got it.
It was a beautiful moment that we shared, and we've really shared it ever since. I do believe that my intention, which was to help her, was primary. It certainly helped me as well, and I'm grateful to her immensely for that.
Their sessions began to last longer. Sometimes their roles would reverse, the patient helping her doctor to confront ghosts long buried.
I felt I have to do something. I almost couldn't not do something.
Yeah. Liz says that you gave her, in many ways, the strength and courage to come out and talk about her experience.
Yeah, that will make me choke up. I'm grateful because I respect her so much, and she's given me so many gifts. So the fact that I could do something for her.
To give that gift to her.
Yeah.
That's a big gift, Sarah.
I'm grateful.
Klein's abuser, Larry Nassar, may have been behind bars, but not Dr. Goldman's. So in September 2018, in this Philadelphia Magazine article, Goldman went public with her own story of child sexual abuse. When that bomb hits...
It hit. It was explosive.
And lo and behold, Lower Merion School District reaches out to you.
I was, pissed off that now that I put it out there that other people could see what you did, now you want to talk to me?
We thought
we were done with this. We wanted Liz Goldman to go away. Well, I did not go away, ultimately. My perpetrator had more legal rights than I did.
At the same time, Goldman took another giant step, recording this video in support of the fight to extend the statute of limitations in Pennsylvania for survivors of child sexual abuse to sue their predators and the institutions that covered up their crimes.
The right thing to do is to protect children. The world is watching. Call your state senator today.
You have 2 children. How important is what you're doing now for their future?
Vital. Vital. Once somebody gets into your head and on your body, you never get to have a second chance at exploring that part of your life. That initial time is spoiled.
Robbed.
It is robbed.
Today, Sarah Klein is an attorney defending other survivors of sexual abuse. Her daughter is now 4 years old.
How much of what you're doing and have done is for her?
All of it. It's for the little girl that I used to be, and it's for her. Yep. I will be doing this work and for the rest of my life.
If Sarah hadn't been your patient, do you think it's possible that you could have gone to your grave without ever coming forward?
It is possible. She certainly facilitated it tremendously, and Sarah definitely inspired me.
You have not slept well for much of your life.
Mm-hmm.
You sleeping any better these days?
Thanks to Dr. Liz, I am. I take no sleeping medications at all anymore. I'm sleeping much better. I'm in remission for my Graves' disease. I'm medication-free, so I feel awesome. And it's taken on the most beautiful momentum I can say for the first time in my entire life. I'm happy and I'm doing very well.
Two extraordinary women, each empowering the other. Silent, no more.
Well, that was amazing. I had seen it before, but not quite with the same force. Amazing, amazing. Thank you, both of you, for letting your stories be out there. I know there are a lot of people watching that are speaking to and changing their lives. So let's see. Let me just introduce our panel. We have a live panel discussion. Tonight we have Adam Berger and of course Liz Goldman and Sarah Klein. I'm going to introduce each one of them. And then we'll have a discussion with questions from the audience and also questions from me. So let me just get started with Sarah Klein is a hero. She didn't write that part, but I did. She's an attorney, an advocate for victims of sexual abuse, a former competitive gymnast, as you saw. In 2018 at the ESPYs, Sarah was the one who accepted the Arthur Ashe Courage Award on behalf of herself and all of the fellow survivors of Larry Nassar. She is a widely respected advocate for legal, cultural, and political change. She never stops moving. And we are so pleased she sits on the board of directors of Child US Advocacy. So welcome with us tonight, Sarah.
Thank you, Marci.
So let me introduce Dr. Liz Goldman, who is delighted to be back at Penn, where she received both her undergraduate degree and her psychiatric training. She is a professor of clinical medicine and a psychiatrist specializing in women's mental health care. And she's a board certified psychiatrist who is glad to stand with Child USA. And we have been delighted to have Liz as one of our allies for a number of years. So welcome, Liz.
Thank you, Marci.
We also are thrilled tonight to have Adam Berger with us. He is an Emmy Award-winning producer with over 2 decades of experience in network sports television. His greatest passion is storytelling, as he's produced over 1,000 features. But according to him, the most meaningful and important work of his career is Silent No More. And we are delighted to have you with us tonight, Adam.
My pleasure to be here. It's an honor. Thank you.
We had also hoped to have Armin Katayan, but I don't see him on the screen because I fear that he is still down for the count with the COVID vaccine second dose. And we would never ask anybody to reschedule that. So yay, Armin, I'm glad you got it. But we hope to see you at another event. He is an amazing sports journalist and someone that has written the book on Tiger Woods, who of course seems to be in the news every day. So Armin, we miss you, but please, hope you feel better soon. So thanks to each of you for joining us. And I'd like to start by asking, whose idea was this, right? I mean, it's such a beautiful and cohesive story. How did this get started, this project?
Well, Adam. Well, you know, I just came across the article in Philadelphia Magazine that Liz had, that was all about Liz and her story. But she mentioned how in it, she did not mention Sarah by name, but how she was inspired by one of her patients who was a victim and survivor of Larry Nassar. And I just felt that it was such an important story, so compelling, and it deserved to be told not just at the local or regional level in a magazine. As powerful as Liz's words were in Philadelphia Magazine, I knew that on camera, it would be even more impactful. And if we could also have her patient, who I didn't know at the time, Sarah, participate, the two of them together, it's such a remarkable, it's horrific, obviously, what Liz went through and what Sarah went through. But the third part of the story, where they came together and have inspired each other and given each other courage and strength to tackle all of this, is just so unbelievable. And I felt that it was so important to be told at the national level.
So did you just reach out to Liz? How did you get in touch with Liz?
Yeah, I found Liz's office number online, and I left her a voicemail, and she called me back like within the hour, and we spoke at length. And I just told her then how moved I was by what she had shared in Philadelphia Magazine, and that I promised her, as I promise everybody that I do a story on of any type of delicate nature, that I promise you it'll be handled sensitively and tastefully. And it's, as Arm and I talked about again today, it's all about trust. And I needed to gain Liz's trust. And then, but I also said that if we're going to be able to do this at the national level, we would need your patient's participation. And so she spoke with Sarah, and then Sarah agreed. She said, I believe anything for Dr. Liz. And and it's all about trust. And it was, I gained the trust of Liz and then Sarah, and then told them all about not just myself, but Armin and the work that we had done together. And obviously they knew Armin because his record speaks for itself. And then by the time we did the interviews and Armin was able to come in and sit down with both of them and Liz's mom and husband, they felt extremely comfortable in front of him, and revealing, some of the darkest and deepest moments of their life. And that's not easy to do. Not everybody would do that. Just have the courage and strength just to talk about it on camera, to me, is unbelievably remarkable. And I can't thank both of them enough for doing it.
Well, I mean, they both are so authentic, right? My big beef with the Me Too movement is that it's this golden invitation to every survivor: tell your story, but not every survivor's ready. Some will never be ready. And if there's no justice, if there's no, like, both of you strong women have gotten good response in the end. You fought like hell and you've gotten it. How do you feel now about, one, the decision to come forward, and two, the decision to do something like this remarkable film? Why don't we start with Dr. Liz?
Thanks, Marci. I mean, the best thing that I never could have expected or honestly even hoped for in coming out with the article in the Philly Mag and with, for sure, this film, is that it may come across sounding pathetic, but I got a lot of people saying, wow, this is really bad, what happened to you? And frankly, the validation that this was really bad was beyond therapeutically helpful. I mean, I really have maintained decades-long confusion. Was this that bad? Could it have been that bad? I know what happened physically. but the school's telling me it's not that bad. And it's a whirlwind of confusion. So the validation of people seemingly readily saying that's disgusting, which frankly I can do to anybody else who tells me their story. When Sarah tells me her story, that's disgusting and that's just wrong, and it's blatantly so. But it's a really different experience for one's own story and one's own life. So it made me much less confused that I guess objectively other people thought that's really not a good thing that happened to you. And that was beyond psychologically beneficial for me.
That is such an interesting way of looking at it. I mean, and Sarah, how are you feeling at this point? I mean, you've been on the national stage, and you kind of had to hide to have your second beautiful baby. But how are you feeling about all of this, having just rewatched this amazing film?
Yeah, it is very, very emotional. I think I cried for the last 30 minutes. I mean, Dr. Liz is my real life. It's one thing to share the Nasser story that everybody knows. And trust me, that's hard. And that was my real life. But, I do have another side to my private life, and that's my therapist. I mean, this is who I go to for therapy. And so putting that out there, and putting this relationship out there is very vulnerable. And she is my North Star. And she was the first person to say, you're not crazy. And it wasn't your fault. And all these girls that came after you wasn't your fault. And so then, to hear what she had gone through and where that sort of understanding had come from, if the person you have sort of on this pedestal then discloses something like this to you, it made her all the more human to me and all the more credible for everything she had been telling me and all the ways in which she had been guiding me. And so I'm just super grateful. I mean, it's always hard to talk about this, but to talk about it in the context of like your real adult life with your real life therapist is a whole new can of worms. So I had to think it through. But as Adam said, he and Armin were incredible and worked extra, extra, extra hard to make sure that we felt safe and felt comfortable in going there. So I think it turned out beautifully, but it never gets easier to watch. And Adam, that footage of us as children, man, it's like taking a knife and sticking it in your heart. Like, it's really hard. It's really hard, but it puts it in context. And I hope it puts it in context for the viewers of the mindset that we were in. It's one thing to say I was 8 years old, I didn't have the words or the wherewithal. It's another thing to see that face and to see that footage and say, oh yeah, she really was just a kid, so happy to be
here. Yeah. I mean, it was striking to see each of you in your roles as kids. Right. I mean, you were a manager for a wrestling team and you were doing your sweet gymnastics, and it was just.
Who needs managers for a wrestling team, really?
Yeah.
I mean, what are girls doing?
It's one of those honorary positions that girls get. It's just such a deal. I mean, we didn't have girls' sports when I went to high school, but I went in the Middle Ages, so don't worry about it. So. Jill is giving me some questions from the audience, so let me read these. What an insult that the institutions downplayed what happened to you and kept enabling abusers to keep abusing. How can children be empowered and abusers and institutions which protect them be held accountable in your perspective? So Sarah, you want to start, and then Dr. Liz?
Yeah, I mean, Marci, this is your wheelhouse, right? Like, holding them accountable. We need good statutes of limitation in order to do that. And what's really stunning about our two somewhat parallel stories is that I did get access to the courts as an adult, with a statute of limitations that was blown. And Dr. Liz, sitting here in lovely Pennsylvania, has not gotten access to the courts. And so that's why what Marci and Child USA and advocacy do is so important, right? And that's how we are able to hold these enablers to account, is hitting them where it hurts. And where it hurts is brand damage, reputation damage, and financial damage, because that's what they care about most. That's not what the survivor cares about most, but that's what these institutions care about most.
Yeah.
In terms of kids, I mean, Dr. Liz can probably speak to it better than I can, but just having these conversations with our little ones about being in charge of their own bodies and, sort of teaching boundaries and giving the language that we were never given as kids. And so, I have two little girls, a 4-month-old and a 5-year-old. And my 5-year-old will say sometimes when I'm giving her too many kisses, "Mommy, I'm in charge of my own body. Please stop kissing me." And I'm forced to say, "You're right. Okay, I guess I have to stop kissing you." But Dr. Liz knows far better than I do about how to help kids navigate this. I don't know.
Your answers were perfect, really. I couldn't, add any more to that. I feel like these institutions, at least in Pennsylvania, aren't being held accountable. Mine's a story that's out there where the Lower Merion School District, has zero accountability. My perpetrator is free and alive and, out there doing as he pleases. And, it's strange to me that state by state, these statutes are so different that had I lived, 30 minutes away in New Jersey, it would be a different story. It just is abominable, really.
Yeah. Well, the good news is we're really close in Pennsylvania. So, for those of you who have nothing else to do on April 19th, you must come to Harrisburg for the Rally for a Window. And it's for people like Liz, is really why we fight so hard for this, because it's ridiculous. What she was dragged through, and that institution will be liable. I hope 2021. So Adam, I want to get back to the production of this kind of a story. How do you decide, like, what questions that should be asked? I mean, how did you put this all together? I mean, it was a brainstorm. You saw a story, you make a call. Then what happens?
Then I speak at length with Liz and I got a lot more background information from her. I mean, I went through the whole Philadelphia Magazine story with her, but got a lot more information beyond that, and took extensive notes. And then, because she was the main source, as was Sarah's story obviously was a lot more out there, because of the nature of the Larry Nassar subject. I mean, you could Google it and get all the information you needed in 2 minutes, unfortunately. But with Liz, it involved a lot more conversation. And then what I did was prepared a document for Armin with all the notes in a cohesive manner about the story. And then also a separate document with suggested questions, I thought, for Liz and for Sarah, as well as for Liz's husband, Brad, and her mom, Debbie. And then I sent that to Armin, and then he took a look at the notes as well as the questions, and he added some of his own and tweaked it. But then the most important thing is, when you actually sit down with somebody, it's not just going through the questions that you have ahead of time. It's listening and then following up accordingly based on what somebody tells you, because they may reveal something that you just didn't know or didn't expect. And Armin, without question, is one of the best in the world at not just putting people at ease on camera, but listening and following up appropriately. And this was, incredibly delicate, obviously, subject matter. But, Liz and Sarah both felt very comfortable with him, and they just had the chemistry there, and that allowed them to be so revealing, as I said, about some of their darkest moments, in their lives.
Well, he is quite amazing. I mean, he really is one of the best at what he does. And, this wasn't a sports story, right? He's one of the best sports journalists in the world, but he turned it into such a compelling story that, but it wasn't, it wasn't invasive. It wasn't what you didn't want to see, which sometimes happens with these kinds of documentaries. I mean, I just really, the skill that between Adam and Armin are just really, I take my hat off to you. Really impressive.
Well, thank you. I mean, I greatly appreciate that, but also Alan Goldberg, who's one of the executive producers, had a heavy hand in working with the script with me, with Armin and myself. We spent several months on that, and then the editing process. And I'd also like to give credit to Charlie Askew, who's not with us tonight, but he was our editor, who I sat down with for countless days and put together the story. First I present a paper script to him, and then we edit together all the sound bites and the narration, and then you have to cover, so to speak, with all the additional footage, which Sarah alluded to. Obviously, some of the most striking is of Liz and Sarah when they were so young. But while it is striking, I think it was vital, as Sarah said, because it's one thing to hear someone say you were 8 years old, but when you see an 8-year-old gymnast, or you see a 12-year-old blowing out the candles at her birthday party while she's talking about what happened to her at the hands of this monster, it's incredibly impactful.
Yeah, no, it really is. Okay, all right, let's see. There are so many questions from this audience. They're paying attention. So let me go. So Liz, why don't we start with you? How has your abuse affected your relationships with friends and the way you parent?
Oh my goodness.
You do one or the other.
I turned the chat feature off because it was distracting. So now I don't even know what's coming. It really affected so many choices that I unconsciously made in my teen years, in my 20s. I mean, I made very rigid choices. I made myself very unavailable to men, and made some just choices that don't really fit how I see myself. But I think I just kept on, you put one foot in front of the next and you go on and you say, I'm okay, and I've got to be okay. And, but there's really a lot of damage to, one, or I should speak for myself, my comfort level with different relationships that I had for several years thereafter. I fortunately have had wonderful girlfriends and a lot of support that I've accepted and been able to take in. A lot of those friends are people who I've known from even before that this happened, elementary school age. But definitely it was just really, I'm tongue-tied right now. Just a lot of choices that I think were made out of fear, out of trying to protect myself, out of not allowing myself to be open, doing anything to not be vulnerable. And I paid the price for it psychologically for a long time.
So Sarah, same question for you. I mean, how did it affect friendships, or and how does it inform your parenting?
Yeah, so I alluded to it a little bit in the piece. There was a period of time in my 20s and early 30s where I was virtually paralyzed, and I couldn't put my finger on why. And friends and family saw me kind of withdrawing more and more and more, and kept saying, kind of, what's wrong? How can we help you? But when you can't say what's broken, you can't ask for help on how to fix it. And so it was very surreal. And I look back at that time in my life, and very, very sort of basic stimuli, like going to the drugstore, felt like way too much for me. and I couldn't navigate it. And so I created a little nest for myself in a 1-bedroom apartment and went out and did my little job and came home and stayed there. And from a Friday after work until a Monday morning, literally would not interact with one single other human being. And so the manifestations, right, of child sex abuse look very different across the board, but there are sort of those common themes of, you know, the anxiety, the inability to face any sort of stimulation, the physical stuff. You know, during that time, my body started shutting down, and I, you know, had all sorts of issues there, which I came to learn is all related, right? The body keeps the score, as we know, and the psyche keeps the score, whether you have brought that abuse to awareness in your psyche or not. And so it affected me, you know, in essence, that I took a time out from my life for a major formative adult portion of my life, and then I got pregnant with this baby and was almost sort of forced to re-enter the world, but didn't know how to do it. And that's why I sort of desperately called Dr. Liz saying, I need somebody to help me. I'm struggling. I don't know why. I don't know what. It wasn't that classic sort of postpartum depression. It was almost, I don't know how to be an adult because I've never gotten past my early childhood trauma that I haven't even brought to my psychological awareness yet, right? So it's layer upon layer upon layer. And I desperately called every mental health, you know, person on the main line of Philadelphia, and, you know, not surprisingly, couldn't find anybody to even meet with me, because it's very hard to gain access to good mental health care. And, you know, as a person with good insurance and a person with a job, I still couldn't get in the door. And I think, you know, we alluded to it in the piece, but like I had to fight to find somebody to help me. And I was turned away and turned away and turned away. And, you know, somehow I got this name of this woman and called her. And on her voicemail, it literally said, thank you for calling Dr. Liz. I am not accepting any new patients, but you can leave a message and I'll get back to you. Right. And I was like, I left this message in pure desperation, and she had no availability and was literally not taking new patients and probably had a waiting list until 2030, but called me back. And for some odd divine reason, got me in the door. And for that, you know, I'm forever grateful. I just took about 100 turns from your question. It impacts the rest of your life. I still, you know, have problems with trust and, you know, intimacy and knowing who to believe and not believe and second guessing my own intuition, right? You think you know somebody, but you have no idea. So it's, you know, it's something you manage the rest of your life.
I think your description of not being able to understand, like living in this bubble and not knowing why it's not normal, it was so clear. You know, I mean, one of the things that broke the statute of limitations movement was when we got this study that said the average age to come forward is 52. And it really was, that's the moment in which people who haven't been through this say, what's taking so long? And what you just described is so accurate and authentic about, look, you're in the middle of it. You don't see it. But then
you don't want to see it either.
You don't, and who would, right? I mean, it would be much better to have a different problem than to have that problem, right? So it's got to be something else. But the more we learn about trauma, the more it does seem like it is, in fact, impossible to see yourself in the way you need to for so long. And that clearly was you, Liz, as well.
Oh, yeah.
which is, I mean, you're a psychiatrist, yeah, highly educated psychiatrist. If you couldn't see it, you know, God help everybody.
Well, I mean, different from Sarah. Sarah describes her experience as kind of falling apart and involuting into this very isolated space. I kind of became a machine of keep on keeping on, keep, you know, doing, doing what the world seems to expect of me, and that part works. I can go to school and do well. I can go to med school and do well. I can have various things appear to be going really smoothly. And actually, I am fundamentally a happy person, so it's not like I wasn't happy. But there's such fear-induced, or there was for me, such fear-induced anxiety about intimacy and trust and what is okay, what isn't okay. And it really, certainly for me, rendered me paralytic in many ways in regard to just even basic knowledge of what I was comfortable with and really who I could trust. I mean, case in point, this is, you know, many years later, in my later 40s, Adam enters the scene. Adam sat down with me many times to, as he says, gain my trust. I still didn't trust Adam until Silent No More actually came out. I was like, I don't know about this. You know, what is he trying to do? Like, you know, why does anybody care about this? And it's unfortunate because I actually consider myself to be a trusting person. And in regard to, I like people, I try to like people. I think the past couple of years politically, I like people less, but in general, I do really like people, right? And it's still just very hard to believe that people will have your back or really actually help. You know, and again, I'm rendered a little speechless here. It's hard to have an audience that's not visible. It definitely has a major effect on just, I think, you know, one's ability to understand who is in one's corner.
Yeah, no, I believe that. You know, so we now have this universe where we have brave warriors like you two coming forward, right? And we have the storytellers like Adam and Armin who are telling the story. And so I wanted to go back to Adam to say, how did it affect you? Right? I mean, was this a topic that you had encountered in previous work, or was this like a wildly different topic and then you're dealing with your own kind of responses to it?
Well, I hadn't done a story like this ever before, but you know, I went to Penn State. I graduated from there, and I was sickened by what happened there. And I also grew up in Lower Merion, and so when I read what happened to Liz, I was even more appalled that this happened literally in my backyard. You know, I'm several years older than Liz, but I knew the schools, I knew the people involved, and I just felt that this was something that, you know, needed to be brought out to a much greater audience. And as I've told everyone before, you know, I'm not a doctor like Liz. I can't help people that way. I'm not an attorney like Sarah, who is spending her life now dedicated to helping other survivors. But by creating awareness and raising awareness, I mean, look, it's a year and a half after this documentary debuted, and we're still talking about it.
Yeah.
And this is my small way of, I think, helping to create awareness and hopefully protect other people from ever experiencing what Liz and Sarah went through. And the feedback that I've gotten universally has been so positive about the story, and so many appreciative people, that it's inspired me to pursue more stories on this subject matter, and hopefully create even more awareness around the world about this horrible topic. And again, to hopefully, you know, prevent other people from ever experiencing anything remotely like what Liz or Sarah, you know, went through, because they never should have experienced it for a second.
So did you get any negative response from anybody in Lower Merion?
No, no,
Interesting.
I didn't, not at all. And in fact, yeah, several people that I'm friends with from my graduating class, all they did was thank me for, you know, bringing this out.
Likewise, my classmates have been really wonderful and vocal and grateful. Likewise, Adam, to you.
That's really special.
Yeah.
I went to, before I went to law school at Penn, I went to grad school at Penn State. And when I came out in 2011, highly critical of Penn State, let's just say that I got some hate mail from some Penn State supporters. Not as, you know, noxious as what the bishops say, but close. It was close. They were not happy. So I'm glad to hear that. I think it's because we've entered a better phase. I think there's more public education, and also I think there's just more awareness. It's such a widespread problem. So, okay, wait, now Jill is texting me more questions. So hold on, guys. What do you all think is the key to shifting the public from being critical of victims to acting empathetically? Especially noting the cases like Nassar, where it takes so many victims coming forward to be believed. But the heart of this question is, how do we get the public no longer critical of victims and instead acting empathetically? What are your thoughts about that, Sarah?
I think we've come a long way. I love Nancy Hogshead Makar, who submitted that question. She has had to teach me how to say her last name about 1,000,000 times. But yeah, you know, I think we're coming a long way. It's one of those things where you just keep chipping away at it, and you see sort of scandal after scandal after scandal. I think the public is beginning to reconcile that there can be people that are publicly perceived as being wonderful or legendary or godlike, and can also be vile sexual predators.
Right.
Speaking of hate mail, I've never gotten more death threats in my life than when I spoke out about Michael Jackson. And you know, our firm representing the two victims in the HBO Leaving Neverland piece, right? And we're seeing it with the Woody Allen, you know, docuseries that's out now. You have this image in your head of Larry Nassar, the 4-time Olympic gymnastics god, of even Mr. Mack, the popular wrestling coach, right? It doesn't matter if the venue is a national venue or a little Lower Merion venue. They are these sort of larger than life figures. And it takes the psyche sort of reconciling. This can be somebody who is perceived as X and can actually be Y, but still be a little bit X, right? Like Woody Allen still being a really talented filmmaker and scriptwriter, and also abusing his own child at the same time. And so I think the more we're seeing it, the more our society is being wrapped in our minds. We're always going to have the haters. And to the haters, I say, I don't give a damn. The truth is the truth is the truth, and the truth will come out eventually, right? And at least we hope. And you see with Dr. Liz, she's got evidence for years to back up what happened to her. We see with Dylan Farrow, she's got evidence the public never even knew existed, right? And so, you know, I think as a society, we're getting more empathetic, but it does challenge the psyche to have to break down the image that we project onto some of these larger than life figures.
Right. You know, so I'm just going to go on a wild tangent now. So, because this has really been bothering me lately. So Matt Gaetz is the representative who's accused potentially by the FBI of engaging in sex trafficking with a 17-year-old, right? Today, right? I'm not, 20 years ago, I understand what happens, but today, how is it possible that the pressure has not been strong enough for him to resign yet? And you don't have to talk about Matt Gaetz himself. It's just that I am amazed when these kinds of facts come out and the shame or whatever isn't enough for someone who's accused to walk away.
I mean, Dr. Liz can probably psychologically diagnose the narcissism and, you know, complete personality disorders that it takes for the actual perpetrator to, you know, stand tall in who they think they are. But it's also shocking, you know, that the entities who enable these people or who employ these people sometimes dig in their heels and attempt to sort of say nothing to see here and test the public opinion to see how far are they really going to push us. Do we actually have to fire this person? Because if you, we might look like we're guilty. But Dr. Liz can probably speak to the psychological aspects of that better than I can.
Liz?
Well, I mean, I think, Marci, you were saying, like, where's the accountability? How can, I mean, we know there are always fiendish people out there who are malignantly narcissistic and somehow in the crevices of their dark psyches somehow justify going after children. But it's really, you know, where is the universal crisis of conscience? Where is, you know, why aren't we all arbiters of justice when it comes to protecting children? And I mean, there are political answers for that, and there just are unconscionable, you know, people protecting their own. And I guess not a lot of accountability on so many levels that makes people feel like they can get away with just keeping themselves on whatever side they choose to stay on, whether it's right or wrong.
I mean, I really have become persuaded that until every single victim has the capacity for justice, we're not going to be able to have that kind of mass accountability because so many think they can hide now, right? I mean, the hiding is still very possible in most states. It's quite successful for many. I mean, just look what Jeffrey Epstein did for years, out in plain sight. So, I mean, I do think that this is a problem we can't solve without finding much more effective accountability. You know, and I mean, Sarah has been involved in the MSU litigation. She only got justice because of this ridiculous 90-day window just for Nassar survivors. And now, Sarah, are you also in the USAG, the bankruptcy proceedings?
Yeah, I'm the chair of the bankruptcy committee.
That's what I thought. So you got to do both.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah. And you know, it's unbelievable, the USOPC and USAG, it's unbelievable. It's become almost laughable what they think that they can get away with. But every time you see, you know, MSU is still hiding these 6,000 documents, right, under attorney-client privilege. They wrote a check for $500 million, not because they felt because he heard what happened. They wrote a check for $500 million to get us to go away, right? And University of Southern California just did the same thing a couple weeks ago. They wrote an $852 million check to get us to go away and to get, you know, themselves out of the news. So is that true accountability? I don't know, right? I don't think so.
No, these mass settlements are a disaster in my view, because they halt the discovery, which is what the public really needs. And it's really what the survivors need. It's the truth. And, you know, the system, power is plastic, as I always tell my students, it's molten plastic. And as power finds its way, this is what happens in society. And we now have a system where USC and USAG and the Boy Scouts, they all find systems that make it easier to keep their secrets rather than otherwise, which is to say, we have so much to do, but you all have made it easier. This has really been wonderful. I want to thank each and every one of you for being on our panel tonight. I must give a shout out to our community ambassadors. This is our new community ambassador program. And our community ambassadors are the ones who got the word out. We had 200 RSVPs for this amazing event. We're taping it, and we're going to put it on YouTube tomorrow so even more people can watch it. And I know it's going to be healing and cathartic for so many people. Thank you. And thank you to our community ambassadors. So let me go down the list. So now for those of you whose name I mispronounce, you're going to tell me. I mean, not now, but you're going to tell me. And so I'll do it right next time. So I'm going to start from Julia Rose. Thank you. Cameron Kurtzner, Katie Amber, Colette Cope. Hey, how's it going in Alabama? Anisha Kadir, how's it going up in Boston? Juanita Grumble, right here in Philly with us. Dr. Nicole Gross, Dawn Harder, Brittany Finch, and Rue Shestababo, Brian. And I know I said that wrong, so Rue, you're going to let me know. So thank you for asking your friends to attend. We are going to do this 4 times a year. And we really are excited about this ability to have a conversation that's national, simultaneous with the kind of heroes you see right here between Adam and Liz and Sarah. And you can't see Armin, but at least you saw him in the video, which he was really, really quite amazing. So thanks to everybody. And as
Can I throw one more thing out there?
Please, yes.
Well, also too, Marci, thank you always for doing all that you do with Child USA. You are a force, and I really am so grateful. And then also in my inarticulate delivery of the challenges that I have faced because of my trauma, I also want to say I'm really happy I have a wonderful husband who's sitting right here with me. And all of the things that were really problematic for a solid 20 years in terms of my choosing, I landed really well. I got a lot of support, a wonderful person, and hi, Brad. Just putting that out there. So
really
wanted to say that, but really thank you, Marci, for putting this together.
Well, now listen, like I said, for those of you without plans, on April 19th, it's a Monday, we will be in Harrisburg on the Capitol steps at 1:30. And we are going to do one of 2 things. We are either going to loudly demand a window, and you're going to bring your signs and your hats and your voices, or we're going to celebrate a window. And I'm perfectly happy to do either one, but we will be there. So I hope we will see all of you there. And for everyone across the country that joined us tonight, thank you so much. Stay in touch with Child USA. You can always email us at info@childusa.org. And once again, love you, Sarah. Love you, Liz. Great to meet you, Adam. And see you next event.
Bye,
guys.
Bye. Take care.
Bye. Good.